My name is Shannon Newton, and I was 36 when my husband looked me dead in the eye and treated my parents' legacy like it was a prize he could win in court. I'm a flight instructor at a regional airport in Pennsylvania. I've been teaching people how to fly for so long that I can spot a nervous student the way you can spot storm clouds. Subtle tremble in the hands, eyes fixed too hard on the instruments, breathing just a little too shallow. I've spent years saying the same things in a calm voice. Easy on the yoke. Trust the numbers. Don't fight the plane. And then one day, I realized I'd been doing the same thing at home, trying not to fight someone who was slowly tightening their grip around everything I loved. Flying started for me at 17, the first time my uncle took me up in his Cessna. The moment the tires lifted off the runway, my whole body went quiet. The world shrank into something manageable. Altitude, airspeed, horizon. Up there, problems didn't disappear, but they got smaller. Solvable. I chased that feeling obsessively. College was 3 jobs, textbooks in one hand, logbook in the other. I paid for flight hours the way some people pay for therapy, one hard-earned session at a time. By 24, I had my commercial license and instructor ratings. I spent the next 5 years grinding at a flight school, teaching pattern work, crosswind landings, emergency procedures, and explaining weather systems until the words felt like they belonged to someone else. My parents were teachers. My mom taught English at the local high school for 32 years. My dad taught middle school science for 28. They weren't wealthy, but they were careful, the kind of people who saved quietly, invested wisely, and never once made me feel like my dreams were too expensive. The house I grew up in was paid off before I even graduated high school. When I turned 27, my parents sat me down at that same kitchen table where my mom used to help me proofread essays and my dad used to draw diagrams of thunderstorms on napkins. They looked older than they had the week before, like life had reached in and rearranged their faces. My father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 4. Those 4 months were the strangest stretch of time I've ever lived through, like watching the clock speed up while your heart begs it to slow down. My parents handled it like they handled everything, with planning, paperwork, and love that showed up in practical decisions. My mom insisted on getting everything legal in order, while my dad was still lucid enough to sign. 3 weeks before he passed, they transferred the house into my name. Full ownership, paid off, no mortgage, clear title. The deed was recorded at the county office on March 15th, 2016. I remember the date because it felt unreal. Like something too big to be reduced to ink and a stamp. I was 27 and single. My mom explained it simply, as if she were handing me a packed lunch. Your father and I talked about this for years. This house is your inheritance. We want you to have it now. No probate, no complications, no waiting. My dad, pale and thinner than I'd ever seen him, tightened his fingers around mine and said, "You'll meet someone someday, sweetheart. When you do, this house is yours to share, but it's your house. Don't forget that." Back then, I thought he was just being a father, protective, sentimental. I didn't understand the weight of those words until much later, when I realized he'd been protecting me from a future he wouldn't live long enough to witness. After he died, my mom moved to a smaller condo near her sister. She said the house held too many memories, and maybe it did, but I think she wanted me to fill it with new ones. I kept my dad's workshop in the basement exactly as he left it, tools still hanging on the pegboard in the same spots. The smell of sawdust and oil that somehow never faded. Sometimes I'd go down there after a long day, sit in his old chair, and let the silence settle on my shoulders like a blanket. Then in 2018, I met Jared Colson at a mutual friend's wedding. He was 26, worked as a dental hygienist, and had a smile that made people lean in. He laughed easily, complimented my job like it was the coolest thing he'd ever heard, and told me he'd always wanted to learn to fly, just to prove I'm not afraid of heights. I should have noticed how quickly he asked about the house. Not in a blunt way, not at first. It was subtle, tucked into admiration. "This place is amazing," he said the first time he walked through the front door. "Your parents had great taste." "It's mostly original," I told him. "They bought it in 1991, kitchen updated in 2010, hardwood floors refinished in 2014. He ran his hand along the banister like he was already imagining himself there permanently. "It feels solid," he said, "like it can't be taken away." At the time, I thought he meant emotionally, like safety, like home. We dated for 8 months before I asked him to move in. His lease was up, His landlord was raising rent, and I loved the idea of coming home to someone. It felt like a victory after years of early mornings and empty rooms. We got married in May 2019. Small ceremony, about 80 people, reception at a local vineyard. His parents helped pay for most of it. I covered the honeymoon, 2 weeks in Hawaii where we ate poke bowls on the beach and promised each other we'd never become one of those couples who drift apart. For the first 3 years, we were steady. We both worked full-time and split bills proportionally. I made around $65,000 as a senior instructor. He made about $48,000 at the dental office. I paid property taxes and homeowner's insurance since it was my house. He handled groceries and utilities. It felt fair. Our routine was comfortable. My 5 a.m. starts, his 7:30 departures, dinners most nights, weekends for projects and friends. The house felt alive again. Laughter in the kitchen, music drifting through the living room. Jared loved hosting. Game nights, small dinner parties, backyard barbecues in summer. He even got along well with my mom. They'd have lunch sometimes. She'd text me afterward. Jared picked out the perfect curtains for my living room. Or he convinced me to try that new restaurant. Loved it. And I believed genuinely that I'd found someone sweet and grounded. Then my best friend Ray said something that landed like turbulence. "You ever notice how Jared talks about the house?" he asked one night at the diner near the airport. "What do you mean?" "Always our house, our place. Never your house. Never just the house. It's like he's claiming it with every sentence." I shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "We're married. It is our place." Ray's eyes didn't leave mine. "Is it?" "My parents left it to me. Yes, but he lives there too." "Living there isn't the same as owning it," Ray said quietly. "And people who blur that line usually have a reason." Ray wasn't dramatic. He worked as a park ranger. Practical, grounded, allergic to unnecessary conflict. If something bothered him enough to say it out loud, it meant it was real. I told myself he was overthinking. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Jared started making bigger decorating decisions without asking. He replaced living room furniture my dad had built, painted over the accent wall my mom had chosen. Each time he'd smile and say, "It's time to make this place really ours," like he was doing me a favor. And then he started inviting his older sister, Brittany, over more often. Brittany was 31, divorced, and the kind of woman who walked into a room like she owned the air. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, made decent money, and had opinions about everything. She'd wander through the house and comment like an appraiser. "This kitchen is great, but those countertops are dated. You should expand the master bath. This basement could be an income suite." Always improvements, always expensive. Always said with that smile that made it feel like a judgment. One night I mentioned it to Jared, trying to sound light. "Your sister sure has thoughts about my house." He didn't even look up from his phone. "She's just trying to help. She understands home values and investment." "We're not selling," I said. "No," he replied, too fast. "But it's smart to think about equity." That word, equity, hung in the air like a warning siren I didn't recognize yet. Because when someone stops talking about your home like it's a home and starts talking about it like it's a tool, that's when love starts turning into strategy. And I didn't see the storm coming. Not until the day I walked into my kitchen and found paperwork spread across the table like someone had been planning my future without me. The paperwork appeared on a random Tuesday in early March, the kind of day that doesn't feel important until it splits your life cleanly in two. I came home later than usual after a long afternoon of crosswind training. My shoulders ached. My head was buzzing with radio calls and airspeed numbers, and all I wanted was a shower and something warm to eat. Instead, I walked into my kitchen and froze. The table was covered. Loan brochures, bank printouts, color-coded spreadsheets. A laptop open to a page titled "Leveraging Equity for Growth." Coffee cups I didn't recognize. Highlighters uncapped and bleeding through paper like someone had been here for hours. Jared sat at the table, elbows resting casually like this was a normal Tuesday conversation. Brittany sat beside him, smiling like she'd been waiting all day for me. "We need to talk," Jared said. I set my flight bag down slowly. "About what?" Brittany didn't let him answer. She never did when she was confident. "This," she said brightly, gesturing to the chaos. "Your house." My stomach tightened. "What about it?" Jared finally looked up. "We've been talking about the future, about not letting opportunities pass us by." I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "You want to explain what all this is?" "It's a HELOC application," Brittany said, tapping one of the packets. "Home equity line of credit. Your house has at least $280,000 in equity. just sitting there doing nothing. Dead money, she added, like that phrase was clever. I stared at her, then at Jared. You want to borrow against my house? Jared exhaled slowly, like I was being difficult. Not borrow. Access. Unlock. It's our equity, Shannon. There it was. We could use it for renovations, Brittany continued, or investments, maybe even a rental property. Preston's been explaining how real estate portfolios actually build wealth. I crossed my arms. The house is paid off. Why would I put debt on it? Brittany laughed softly, the way people do when they think you're adorable and ignorant. That's such limited thinking. You're sitting on almost 300 grand and living like you're scared of money. I'm living comfortably, I said. Bills are paid. We travel. We're fine. Fine, Jared echoed, the word heavy with disappointment. But fine isn't growth. That was new. I turned to him. Since when is my career not good enough? He hesitated, just a second too long. Brittany filled the silence. Shannon, you're amazing at what you do, she said, voice syrupy. But flight instruction has a ceiling. Jared deserves more than a capped lifestyle. I felt something crack. Deserves? I repeated. Deserves what, exactly? A future, Jared said quietly. Something bigger. Bigger than a paid-off house? I asked. Bigger than stability? Brittany leaned back in her chair like she was settling in for a lecture. Prestige matters. Image matters. Jared's friends are buying into developments near the country club. People our age are building wealth, not clinging to sentiment. Sentiment. That word hurt more than I expected. I looked at the papers again. You've already done the research. Jared nodded. We've been talking about this for weeks. We, I asked. He didn't answer. So you made a plan about my house, I said slowly, without me. It affects me too, he snapped. I live here. You live here, I agreed. You don't own it. The room went quiet. Brittany's smile vanished. There it is. There what? The control, she said. You hold the deed over his head. You get to decide everything. That's financial dominance, Shannon. I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. I'm sorry, what? You've structured this marriage so Jared can't build anything of his own, she continued. He's dependent on you, on your parents' house. That's not a partnership. I turned to Jared, waiting, needing for him to shut her down. He didn't. He just stared at the table, jaw tight. You don't actually believe that, I said to him. He finally looked up. Sometimes it feels like I don't have a say. A say in what? I demanded. In risking my parents' house? It's always your parents' house, he shot back. It's never ours, never what we've built together. Because legally, I said, my voice shaking despite myself, it's mine. Brittany pointed at me like she'd been waiting for a confession. Exactly. That's the problem. I felt my hands curl into fists. Get out. She blinked. Excuse me? This is my house, I said, every word deliberate. Get out. Jared stood abruptly. Shannon. No, I snapped. You let her accuse me of abusing you financially, and you're going to tell me no? Brittany grabbed her purse, lips tight. You're making a huge mistake. Jared deserves better than this. She walked out without looking back. The door closed, and the silence that followed was worse than the argument. Jared and I sat there, surrounded by papers that suddenly looked obscene. You didn't disagree with her, I said quietly. He rubbed his face. I didn't say she was right. You didn't say she was wrong either. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, just empty space where his car usually sat. He stayed with Brittany for 3 days. When he came back, he was different, distant, measured. I think we need some space, he said, standing in my kitchen like a guest. Space from what? I asked. Our marriage? From this situation, he replied. From this life. I don't know if it's what I want anymore. The words hit like sudden turbulence. You're serious? Yes. He wanted a trial separation. He packed 2 suitcases and left that afternoon. I stood in the driveway and watched his car disappear, feeling like my house, my safe, solid, unmovable house, had shifted under my feet. Ray came over that night with pizza and beer. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. He wants the house, I said eventually. Ray nodded like he'd expected it. Then you need a lawyer. Now. The next morning, I made the call that would change everything. And for the first time since my father died, I felt his warning echo in my chest. Share, don't surrender. I called the lawyer at 8:17 a.m., sitting in my car in the flight school parking lot, hands still shaking from the night before. Ray had texted me the name before I even asked. Family law, clean cases, doesn't play games. That was all I needed. The receptionist transferred me to Daniel Fisher after I explained briefly that my husband had moved out and there was a house involved. His voice was calm, efficient, the the kind of tone that didn't flinch at emotional messes. "Do you own any real property?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "A house. It was my parents'. They transferred it to me before I got married." "How long before?" 8 years. There was a pause, typing. "Transferred how?" "Full deed transfer, recorded with the county." "And your husband's name was never added?" "No." Another pause, more typing. "Bring me everything. Deed, transfer records, tax documents. Tomorrow if possible." I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my breath until I exhaled. His office was downtown, third floor of a renovated brick building that smelled faintly like old paper and coffee. Daniel Fisher was in his early 50s, gray at the temples, suit tailored but not flashy. The kind of man who looked like he'd seen every version of betrayal and learned not to be impressed. I laid the documents out on his conference table like evidence in a crime scene. He didn't rush, read every page, checked dates, cross-referenced signatures. Finally, he looked up. "This is clean," he said. "Clean. The property was transferred to you in March 2016, he continued. "That's 8 years before your marriage. Clear title. No liens, no refinancing, no commingling." "So," my voice caught, "what does that mean?" "It means the house is your separate property under Pennsylvania law," he said. "Your husband has no claim to it. None." Relief flooded my chest so fast it almost hurt. "He can't take it in a divorce?" "He can try," Fisher said evenly, "but he won't win. The deed speaks for itself." I stared down at the papers, ink and dates and signatures that suddenly felt like armor. What if he argues that he lived there, that he helped with bills? "That might entitle him to compensation for documented contributions," Fisher said. "But that's money, not ownership. Big difference." I hired him on the spot. Fisher warned me to expect divorce papers quickly. "They don't ask for separation unless they've already decided," he said. "And when money's involved, they usually move fast." He was right. 3 days later, I got served at work. A process server showed up while I was briefing a student named Ethan. He handed me a manila envelope and asked me to confirm my name. "Shannon Newton," I said, feeling strangely detached. "You've been served." Ethan shifted awkwardly. We still flying?" "Yes," I said, sharper than intended. "We're flying." At 3,000 feet, with nothing but air and instruments, my mind finally slowed enough to think. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Jared and Brittany had spread out their plans, and opened the envelope. Standard divorce petition, irreconcilable differences. And then buried on page 4, request for primary residence to be awarded to petitioner or sold with proceeds divided equally. He wanted the house. I took photos of every page and emailed them to Fisher. He called within the hour. "Expected," he said. "His lawyer is Gregory Coleman. I know him." "Is that bad?" "It means he'll posture, but once he sees the deed, this part ends quickly." "What do I do now?" "Stay in the house," Fisher said. "It's yours. Don't discuss property with him directly. Everything goes through counsel." "He still has keys." "Change the locks today." "I did." The locksmith finished just before sunset. I sent a single text to Jared, through Fisher, per advice. "Locks change per legal counsel. Reasonable access with 24-hour notice available." The response came through his lawyer 2 hours later. "Improper lockout. Demand immediate key provision." Fisher replied without hesitation. "Client is protecting separate property per Pennsylvania law. Access with notice permitted." Then, nothing. For 3 days. On the 4th, Coleman filed a motion requesting temporary access to the marital residence, listing the house as a shared asset. Fisher filed our response with the deed attached as Exhibit A. The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks out. Ray came over the night before, bringing takeout and that steady presence he'd perfected over years of trail work and bad weather. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." He nodded. "You didn't do anything wrong, you know." "I keep wondering if I should have corrected Jared when he called it our house," I admitted. Ray shook his head. "You got married. You shared your life. That's not deception. That's trust." The courthouse felt smaller than I expected. Same building where Jared and I had gotten our marriage license 5 years earlier. Same metal detectors. Same marble floors. We sat at opposite tables. Jared didn't look at me. He wore the blue suit I'd bought him for our 3rd anniversary. Brittany sat behind him, arms crossed, glaring like she was daring me to breathe wrong. Judge Patricia Morrison entered precisely at 10, mid-50s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging from a chain. Her expression gave nothing away. "Counselor Coleman," she said, scanning the filings. "Your client seeks access to the marital residence and lists it as a marital asset, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Coleman said smoothly. The parties resided there for the entirety of their marriage. My client contributed financially and domestically. Your Honor, Fisher interrupted politely, approaching the bench with a folder. If I may. Judge Morrison took the documents, flipped through them, and stopped at the date. She looked up at Coleman. This deed predates the marriage by 8 years, she said flatly. Explain to me why you've listed this as a marital asset. Coleman's face flushed. While the initial transfer occurred prior to marriage, my client lived there, the judge cut in. That does not create ownership, not in this jurisdiction. She turned to Fisher. No refinancing, no commingling? None, Your Honor. Judge Morrison nodded once. Then the residence is separate property and will remain with Ms. Newton. Jared's shoulders sagged. Brittany looked like she might scream. Regarding access, the judge continued, reasonable notice will be provided to retrieve personal belongings. Motion denied. Gavel down. Done. Outside the courthouse, Fisher exhaled. That went exactly as expected. What happens now? I asked. They'll settle, he said. The house is off the table. Within a week, a settlement proposal arrived. No mention of the house. Split savings. Each keep our own debts and vehicles. I signed. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. No drama, no speeches, just signatures. Jared moved into a development near the country club with Brittany and her fiancé. Ray helped me turn the guest room into an office. You know what's wild? He said, assembling a desk. 5 years together, and once he's gone, it's like he was never here. He was right. The house felt like itself again. And for the first time, I understood what my father had really meant. Protection isn't control. It's clarity. The divorce finalized on a Thursday afternoon in late June. No courtroom drama, no raised voices, just a conference room, a stack of papers, and a judge who had already made up her mind weeks earlier. I signed my name where Fisher pointed, steady and calm, like I was logging another routine flight instead of closing the chapter on a 5-year marriage. When it was done, Jared didn't say a word to me. He nodded once, barely, and followed his lawyer out of the room. Brittany wasn't there. I suspected she couldn't stand watching a plan collapse in silence. I walked out alone, sunlight hitting my face, as I stepped onto the courthouse steps. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, letting it sink in. I hadn't lost my husband. I'd lost a threat I hadn't even realized I was living with. The settlement was clean. We split what little we had jointly. He kept his car and personal belongings. I kept mine. No spousal support, no drama. And most importantly, no house. Ray picked me up afterward and didn't ask how I felt. He knew better. We drove in silence for a few minutes before he said, "So what now?" I looked out the window, watching familiar streets pass by. Now I go home. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The house felt different without Jared. Not empty, exactly. Quieter. Like it had exhaled. I walked through each room slowly, noticing things I hadn't in years. The way the afternoon light hit the hallway. The faint creak in the third stair my dad never quite fixed. The workshop door downstairs. Still solid, still waiting. Jared left surprisingly little behind. A few hangers in the closet. Some kitchen gadgets I didn't remember buying. It struck me how temporary he'd always been, even when I thought we were building something permanent. Life didn't explode into happiness overnight. It stabilized. And stability, I learned, was underrated. A few months later, the owner of the flight school officially retired. Just like he'd promised, he offered me a buy-in. I used savings, not loans, not leverage, to purchase a 40% stake. 2 other senior instructors joined me. We became partners. Business picked up faster than any of us expected. We hired more instructors, bought another aircraft, expanded our advanced training program. My income climbed past numbers Jared once scoffed at. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like alignment. Ray introduced me to Mark Ellis, his cousin, a wildlife biologist who spent most of his time knee-deep in mud or tracking collars in the mountains. He was quiet, observant, and completely uninterested in impressing anyone. On our 3rd date, he asked about my parents, not the house. When he finally saw it, he didn't comment on square footage or value. He stood on the deck my father built and said, "This feels cared for." That was all. I heard through mutual friends that Jared's new life didn't turn out the way he'd imagined. Brittany's engagement fell apart. The development near the country club lost its shine. He reached out once, indirectly, asking if I'd consider talking. I said no, not out of spite. Out of clarity. One evening, months later, I sat in my dad's workshop, the smell of sawdust and oil still clinging to the air. I ran my hand over the workbench, over the small nicks and scratches that told a lifetime of quiet effort. My father had known, not that my marriage would fail, but that I would one day be asked to trade safety for approval, to confuse love with surrender. He'd made sure I didn't have to. The house was never about money, or equity, or leverage. It was about having a place that didn't disappear when someone else decided I wasn't enough. I still teach people how to fly. I still wake up early. I still come home tired some days. But I come home to myself. And that house, my house, stands exactly where it always has.